talk. My name's Jo. I've been a game designer for nearly 12 years now. And yeah, this is just something I wanted to talk about. So I'm quite passionate about parenting in technology, particularly in the games industry. So I'll just tell you a little bit about what I've done in my career first. So if we can go to the next slide. So these are some of the things I've done. I started out working on a party game called Buzz. It's a quiz game. And I've done a lot of games that are sort of made to be played together, children's games. I did a bit of stuff with Toys to Life, which was really cool, kind of a mixture of mobile and console gaming. So go to the next slide. I can show you what I do now. So I now work for a company called Snap Finger Click, and we specialize in making games that can still be played together, but can also be played online over streaming platforms like Twitch and YouTube, and you can play along by typing in some commands and joining in. So it's quite fun. That's what I do now. So next slide. So as I said at the beginning, I'm a parent. My life changed pretty dramatically when I had my daughter, and it caused me to think quite a lot about the technology industry in general and how well we support parents, working parents within it, and how we make it possible for people to do both. So next slide. So when I was pregnant, I was a bit naive, I think. I thought, oh, you know, it'll be fine. I'll just go straight back to work. It's not going to affect my career. It's not going to affect my work at all. You know, not true. It was very much, you know, even as much as I wanted to just get back to work, you have to recover, of course. You've gone through childbirth. You're not going to just kind of spring back to doing things again. Another thing was, I think I just sort of assumed, oh, you know, someone else can look after the baby. It doesn't always have to be me, but sometimes that works, but for me it didn't. My daughter was really dependent on me because we were breastfeeding and I couldn't get her to take a bottle. So I was quite lucky in that breastfeeding went very well for me, but bottle feeding, I couldn't get her to take one. So there was no way that I could have left her for more than an hour or two for the first few months of her life until she was old enough to sort of start drinking from a cup. So yeah, with the best will in the world, there was just no practical way for me to be away from her. So like many other mothers, 84% was the stat I found online, I became her primary caregiver, which meant that, you know, just naturally I fell into that role and I had to find a way to balance motherhood with my work. So next slide. So I've dug up a few stats. I haven't got sources on this slide, unfortunately, because I couldn't fit it all in, but you can Google these and you'll find them. They're in sort of multiple places. But one of the stats I found was that 82% of women in the UK over 40 are mothers. So yeah, this is something that we have to address because it's going to affect the vast majority of people in your workforce at some point. So to sort of ignore that will be cutting out quite a lot of people for a key period in their career. As you'd expect, about half the workforce are women, but as we know, there aren't that many women in tech jobs, only 19% at the moment. And unfortunately, a lot of women don't stay in the tech industry. More than half of them end up leaving during their careers. And those that do stay, unfortunately, don't tend to advance as much as men do. Only 30% of women in tech over 35, sorry, 30% of women in tech over 35 are still in junior roles compared to only 5% of men. While this talk is about parenting in general, I want to kind of highlight women in particular because they do tend to take on the responsibility of caregiving to their children more than men. And I think these stats reflect that and how the technology industry or you know, possibly other industries are not giving enough support to working mothers and working parents in general. Next slide. So I come from the games industry, and I'm sure there are some differences between the games industry and other areas of tech, and there may well be other areas of tech that do this a lot better. But I can speak about the games industry as a standalone part of the tech industry. This is from a Game Developers Conference report. They do this annually. Their event is held in March, and they always release a report in February every year, which shows the state of the current industry. And this is a slide from this year's report, which was released a couple of weeks ago. And every year it paints a very similar picture, that the games industry is sustained by young people, and a lot of those people don't stick around. So you can see that people have only been in the industry typically less than a decade. And that sort of tallies with my experience as well, in that most of the people that come into this industry, there's a lot of people in their 20s and early 30s, and then people tend to leave around that time. And I'm sure that's no coincidence that that's the sort of average age of when people start having children. So, you know, we're sort of losing our best people, which is unfortunate, because when you know, even if you're a young person now, you won't be forever. This is something that will come for us all. You want to be in a job, in a career that you'll be in for life, right? That's what you do. You work hard, you study. You don't want to join an industry that isn't going to suit you when you hit your mid-30s and beyond. So this is something we need to look at, really. So the next slide. So when I joined the industry, things were a bit different. I joined back in 2008 when I was 23 at the time. It was pretty dire, the number of women that were in the industry at that time. It was only 4%, and it's improved quite a bit since then. I mean, there's a long way to go, but yeah, at that time there were very few women in the industry at all, which is interesting for me, because my cohorts, or people around my age, there aren't as many of them as there are women who are younger than me and haven't encountered this problem yet. I feel like it's going to be a bit of a ticking time bomb, that there's going to be quite a few women who are starting to approach an older age and are going to hit this issue that they want to go and have children, and the industry they work for is not set up to support them enough. Before I had my daughter, I only worked with 4 women. I'd only even known 4 women that I worked with in the industry to get pregnant and have a child. And I've probably worked with over 100 women, I would guess. A lot more men, of course, but yeah, most of those did not come back. Only one of them came back full time. The others asked for flexible working, weren't able to get it, so ended up going elsewhere or just leaving the industry, unfortunately. And that's really not fair, I feel. Before I had my daughter, I worked for a bigger companies, and looking back to them and thinking about how they operated, I'm not sure how it could have been possible for me to do it and to return to work, because I was working in London, for example. I'm based in Brighton, or near Brighton. So I used to have to leave the house about 7:45 in the morning. I wouldn't get back until about 8 p.m. at night on a good day, if the trains weren't terrible, which they usually were. So, you know, my nursery for my daughter opens from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. So there was no crossover there where I could have dropped her off, picked her up. It's just not possible. It wouldn't have been possible for me. I honestly don't know how I could have made that work at that company. So if we go to the next slide. So I was able to do this really because I joined a smaller company, a startup, an independent company, Snapping a Click, who I still work for. And they were founded by some former colleagues of mine, and you know, we started small, we're growing, but the key difference here is that with a small growing company, there's a lot more opportunities to have an influence and a say in our working practices and policies. I joined as a senior member of staff, so my voice counted more, and I have been able to help shape those working practices, and I'd like to share some of those with you because I believe they've been very successful for us. So we go to the next slide. So a few things about Snapping a Click. So we're 40% female, which is still not hitting the average workforce, but it's a lot better than a lot of other technology companies. So we're moving in the right direction, which I'm really proud of. Our job adverts tend to do very well with all genders. We get typically a good 50-50% gender split on them. and we are 100% flexible working. We support whatever circumstances our candidates have. So we are very flexible to that. We're very open to accepting applications from people who have all sorts of restrictions on what they can do. So we go to the next slide. So I saw this quote used in an article about recruitment. I thought it was really interesting because I often talk to a lot of my peers in the industry who work at other companies, and some of them who even have to say in the running of the company and their hiring policies. And common thing that comes up a lot is, I wish I could hire more of this type of person, but they never apply. What can I do? And yeah, if you can't catch a fish, you shouldn't blame the sea. It's not the fault of the workforce. If somebody within the workforce, if you want to attract more people from within the workforce and they're not applying, that's not because they don't exist. It's because there's a reason why. There's something going on within your company's culture, within its working practices, and the way it sells itself to potential candidates that's not attracting those people. Let's go to the next slide. So these are some of the things that we do at Snapping a Click, and I believe is key in getting more people from all walks of life to apply to us. We are very much happy for you to work from home for any reason, as much or as little as you want. We have a studio, that's where I am right now, but there is no obligation to come in, and we don't have any set days for you to come in, and people just really do what suits them. Some people come in every day because they like the focus of being in a kind of work environment, and some people just never come in, and we hardly ever see them. They only come in, if there's a sort of meeting or a team lunch or something like that. And other people have sort of days they like to nominate, so they might come in on a Tuesday or a Thursday, or I personally come in 3 days a week, and I work from home 2 days a week typically, but it's very flexible. If I want to work from home more, I will. In fact, today is normally one of my home days and I'm in the office, so it doesn't matter. We just let people do what they want. Part-time roles as well, just letting people not need to do a full-time job. They can do whatever, half the week, a few hours a week, whatever suits them, and you can easily do that. We also let people choose their own hours, so it doesn't have to be 9 to 5. They can do 8 to 4, 7 to 3, 10 to 6, whatever people want to do. Our philosophy is very much that we adapt to the people, not the other way around. In a lot of companies, there's always talk about company culture and company fit, and looking for people that fit in with the company. Well, we believe that we should be the ones that are flexible. We're the ones that should adapt. If we want to make those good hires and get good people in, then we need to adapt to their needs. So if we go to the next slide. So just to talk about all those things in a little bit more detail. So with remote working, especially, this is something that tends to scare people who are working for companies that haven't done it before. There's lots of reasons that I hear people say why it's not great. They want that face-to-face communication. They want to know that people are working. They want to be able to see them. Those are valid points, of course, but I think there are some really amazing benefits of remote working that completely outweigh all the negatives, and that's just simply your talent pool. So I drew up these images from a map here. So we're based in Brighton, and I did a little circle around Brighton of a 20-mile radius, which was kind of like, okay, this would be our talent pool if we required you to come into the office every day. Probably, yeah, okay, some people might relocate, but again, relocation is something that is more attractive to younger single people who haven't got other responsibilities in their lives. So again, we're cutting out parents. So that's a tiny little talent pool, and we're looking for all our best people in this really small range, whereas we could be looking around the world. That's insane. That's the difference is incredible, and to feel that that's not worth it because you value face-to-face communication and other things that can be solved, you know, we work in the technology industry, we should be able to solve these issues really easily. We can work, you know, by and large, we just use our laptops, we have everything we need there. We should be comfortable with things like messenger apps. They shouldn't be scary, or video calls. You know, I'm sitting here remotely doing a webinar to you people. I haven't had to come to you. We should be comfortable with that. And we make a lot of use of messenger apps. I don't know how common it is in other technology industries, but we do something every day called a stand-up meeting, which is where you talk about what you did yesterday and what you intend to achieve today, and if you have any sort of issues or blockers that are preventing you from doing your work. And it's really common in the games industry, and normally it's called a stand-up because you physically stand up to do it, and that's supposed to make it go a bit quicker. And normally at companies in the past, we've sort of set the stand-up to be about half an hour after our starting days, like when our day would normally start, because, you know, people are late, getting a coffee, etc. And there's actually some really disadvantages to doing it this way, because most people don't tend to do any work at all in that first half hour, because they don't really want to get into anything knowing they're going to get interrupted. So people just sit around and chat really until the stand-up begins. During the stand-up, a lot of people kind of zone out, they're not quite awake yet, they're not really listening. For some people, it's quite stressful standing up and saying stuff in front of other people. They're thinking about what they want to say, and they're focusing so much on that they're not listening. I actually think it's much better doing it through messenger apps, because we simply write text. Yesterday I did this, today I'm doing that, these are my blockers. You can go back and read everybody's, you can start a threaded conversation with them, and you just post that as your first thing just before you start work. First thing you do is post your stand-up, which also helps you kind of get to grips with what you're doing for the day as well. So I actually think there's some real advantages to doing things this way. And another thing is, like, for people, it's a very personal thing, remote working. It's not for everyone, and I get that. But I think for some people who don't like to do it, they really struggle to understand how other people can do it. And everyone has their own little ways of doing it. You know, some people have a little space at home that they like to go into, or they need to go for a walk before they start work so that they feel like they're in a different mode. But other people can just switch it on and off very easily. And I think it's about understanding everybody's different, and it's perfectly possible for people to work at home. And it's not like, you know, the fear that they're not working, it's not something you need to worry about, because you can tell if people are working. You have a to-do list for them, you're reviewing their work, you know if they're not working, and you can hire people into an office and they just are in the kitchen all day, or they're not really working very much. You know, you can get people slacking off in the office just as much as you might have someone at home. Like, we've never had a problem. If anything, I think people who work from home are more keen to show that they really are working. I read a study that was done by Remote Tools. They did a survey of remote workers, and it shows that actually generally remote workers tend to do more work and more hours, which doesn't surprise me, because I can see why this happens. You get to the sort of end of your day, but you're in the middle of something, you just want to finish it. You don't have a train you need to catch, you don't have some set time that you feel you need to just get up and go. So actually remote workers, they do tend to do a little bit more work in some ways, because they're not on a sort of set time where they have to go. They'll happily wrap up something they're doing and spend an extra half hour doing it. So actually benefits the company. I'll go to the next slide now. Yeah, part-time. I want to talk about part-time a bit, because it's very, very rare in the games industry. Yuki did a survey. I didn't incorporate it into the slides because it was literally only released the other day, but only 6% I saw of staff are part-time. What I couldn't see in that stat was how many people within that 6% started full-time but were given part-time through other circumstances, because of course once you're in and you're working, companies are a bit more keen to hold on to the people they care about, and I suspect the number that were actually hired as part-time probably comes down even more. I don't know why there's such a fear about part-time, because in my experience there are plenty of people that are already really divided between projects all the time, and actually the more senior you go, the more divided you seem to be, because you're more overseeing things, you're not really getting on the front line and working on something 100% of the time. So if anything, it should suit senior people even more being part-time, because you're already having to divide your time up. And as a project manager on a project, it shouldn't matter to you if you've got half a person, a quarter of a person. You're not concerned with what they're spending the other time doing. If they were working on another project, or if they're off, enjoying their life, you know, or doing whatever it is they need to do. I think we need to be a lot more open to part-time in the games industry and the technology industry as a whole, because yeah, we're really losing a lot of opportunity here for some good talent, and I'd rather have a really talented person part-time than a sort of mediocre person full-time, and we shouldn't be cutting those people out. Go to the next slide. And yeah, flexible work hours. So I think it's kind of obvious, but something that's very, it's a big debate in the games industry, and it might be very unique to the games industry, so apologies if this is just all kind of obvious to you, but the games industry's had some trouble in the past with crunch, and that's sort of enforced overtime, making people work into the evenings and into the weekends, and people are kind of wising up to it now, and a lot of companies like to promote themselves as being pro 9 to 5, but 9 to 5 is not actually really a good thing to a lot of people. When you see 9 to 5, you don't think, oh, that's great. A lot of people think, well, 9 to 5 doesn't suit my life. You know, Dolly Parton famously sung about 9 to 5 and it being a way to make a living. You know, we need to think about things in a more flexible way. Sort of cheerleading 9 to 5 is actually a bit of a turn off for people who, you know, have to do the school run, have to pick up their kids. That doesn't work for them at all, and so we should be a bit more flexible about work hours. And actually at Snap Finger Click, we're very, very flexible. We don't even force you to do a sort of unbroken 8-hour slot. You know, some people like to do 3 hours, 4 hours, break in the middle, do the rest later. You know, that's how I often work on my home days, because I'm sort of looking after my daughter at the same time. So I do my 8 hours somehow, but it varies every day because it depends on her and how much she needs me. So if I've had a day where she needs a lot of sort of support from me and I haven't managed to get stuff done, then I spend more time in the evenings, or I might even roll it over to a weekend to make up for it. But I make sure that I do the hours that I've promised to do. I just fit them in where I can, and you know, I'm getting my work done. That's all that should really matter. You know, if this is too scary, you can still have core hours, of course. You know, this is where you kind of come in anytime between sort of 7 and 10 and go anytime between 3 and 6 or whatever. But there's nothing if it we're very much just do whatever you want. We even had someone who wanted to work at 3 a.m. because that's how he liked to work. So fine, whatever suits you. You know, it doesn't matter. If you're getting the work done and we can still communicate, then it doesn't matter. Go to the next slide. So there's a few other things that I kind of want to talk about. I think company culture is quite important. I sort of touched upon this at the beginning, but there are lots of little things that, you know, are on the website or are just generally part of the culture of the company that can turn people off from wanting to work there. Particularly in the games industry, we're very big on our social events. And in the games industry, there's usually a lot of drinking as well, which is a whole other debate. But the social events always tend to be after hours things. So it's like, hey, every Friday we go to the pub. And that's great, you know, and I loved that when I was in my 20s. Not so much now, I can't do that. And I didn't think about it that much then, but I think about it now and I realise that really cuts out a lot of people. If you need to be home to look after your kids, you can't do it. There's no way you can do it. So don't just have social events in the evenings. You know, think about how you can fit them in for other people. Not everyone wants to go to the pub anyway, but I mean, have a diverse range of social events. It's okay to have some after hours ones, but also think about having them, you know, at lunchtime, or even having an off day, like take everyone off site for a day or half a day to go and do something. You know, those things, focus on those things because those are much more inclusive. And something we do in the games industry is jams, game jams. And I have very mixed feelings about it because I do think they're really good and really valuable, but they take a lot of your personal time up, because what they are is essentially asking you to create a game in a very, very small space of time, you know, a few days or a week or something like that, and you've got to create a whole game. And the idea is to focus everybody to come up with a little idea, build it, learn from it. I think, you know, the main thing you get out of game jams is the team bonding exercise. You might get a cool idea, but I think 99% of the time it's more about working together and sort of sharing that time together. But people do put a lot of their own personal time into it. They have crazy long days. working into the evenings and working weekends. So I know a lot of games companies have these kind of game jams a couple of times a year or more often. Sometimes they're mandatory, and that can be really difficult for parents because of course they can't dedicate their time to it. So I think if you want to do something like that, think instead about personal development weeks where you let people have some time off their normal work to do other things, but not necessarily a game jam. But it might be a game jam, but it could also just be learning a new skill, maybe following a tutorial, or maybe there's a feature in some software you're working on that is, you know, has been culled, but you really wanted to do it. So maybe you and some other people can get together and build it. Or maybe it's some tool that you've wanted to build to improve your processes for some time, or, you know, whatever it is you want to do. And maybe you want to learn a completely different skill. You know, if you want to do things like that, I think it's better to frame it this way. So it's not necessarily saying that, you know, we expect you to give up your evenings, we expect you to be part of this. And even if we say it's optional, but it's such a big deal, even that can still make you feel like you're cutting certain people out of the fun, you know. And I won't go into this too much, but of course the right language in jobs. You know, there's lots of stuff written about this online that you can go and read after this if you want to. But you know, there are a lot of studies that have shown that language in job adverts and just the general language that you use on your website can be very off-putting for certain people, particularly women, particularly parents. You know, things like words that get used a lot in the games industry, stuff like coding ninja or rock star. You know, it makes it, the connotations of those words makes it sound like you're going to be expected to go above and beyond. You're going to have to give up your time. It's subtle, but it can make a difference. We have a lot of success in toning down that kind of language in our job adverts, making it a lot more inclusive and friendly. And we don't just focus on posting to technology websites because you tend to just get the same types of people that look at those websites. We like to look beyond that. We try and target people who are perhaps in other industries. We post on a lot of filmmaking sites, just general media sites. We also target graduate boards through universities. We've actually posted to Facebook quite a lot recently. We find little groups on Facebook and share them there. And the advantage of that as well, by the way, for a small company is it's free. You don't have to pay for it to be listed, so that's also good. But yeah, like thinking a little bit more about, you know, going to those people as well, you know, where they wouldn't perhaps, you know, there's someone who used to work in the tech industry, they feel that they are no longer belonging in the tech industry, so they're not looking at these tech job pages anymore. So go and seek those people out where they may be now, and you might be able to attract them and track them back. Go to the next slide. So what I'm talking about here, it's not just about parenting. I think parenting is obviously a big thing and it's kind of the main thing, but this is really about accommodating your workforce at large, and having flexible working can benefit all kinds of people. And you know, maybe you don't want to be a parent, or maybe your children are grown up now and it's not a problem for you, but there are other things that can happen in your life that can mean that you can't come into the office every single day. You can't work set 9 to 5 hours. You can't work full time. You know, you might have issues with mobility and getting about. You might have an illness that prevents you from working, you know, 40-hour week. Mental health is a big thing, especially in the games industry. There's a lot of the same Yuki survey I mentioned earlier is quite a high. I think it was about 30% of people self-reported mental health issues, and that can really affect your ability to want to come in at the same time every day, come into the office, but you might feel more comfortable at home for those days. And you know, being a caregiver is not just about children. You may have to become a carer for a partner, for a parent. We want to accommodate those people, and we've had, you know, we've got people at Snap Finger Click that fall into these categories and have been able to continue their careers. This should concern us all, because you never know what life is going to throw at you. So the idea that you would have to give up your career when you didn't want to, that doesn't seem right to me. That doesn't seem fair. We should be finding ways to support people, and we should be the industry that leads this, because technology is about, you know, being modern, finding new ways to do things, finding ways to use our technology to solve problems, and this is the problem that we should be solving. Go to the next slide. So I'm just going to kind of wrap it up now, but there's a few more little things that I think we can all do to make the world a better place in technology. Obviously, adopting flexible working practices as much as possible. If you run a company and you have a say in that, please consider doing that. And if you don't, then please spread the word within your company and champion it. And if you do and already do it, then tell people, share your stories, share your successes, encourage more people to do it, make it a normal thing. If you're a big company, I can understand it's scary. You don't want to just make a change like this overnight. It can be quite a big thing, but that doesn't mean you can't take small steps towards it. You know, you could start by giving everybody, you know, a nominated work from home day, or just or just setting up work from home as an option if people need it because, you know, they're not feeling very well that day, or they need to wait in for delivery, or, you know, whatever. But you can make small steps towards it. Some companies aren't even set up in any way to work from home, and that just doesn't seem right to me. You know, things happen all the time, and to sort of say, oh, you've just got to take a day off, doesn't seem fair to me. There are small things you can do. The flexi hours, it doesn't have to be as free as we have it. It can be, as I said, more like just coming in an hour earlier and leaving an hour earlier. You know, you can keep the core hours if that's what you want to do, and see how it goes. And yeah, I mean, this talk has been about supporting parents, and then naturally I've kind of drifted a bit more towards women because it does tend to affect them more. Of course, it affects men too, and I've worked with a lot of dads, and one thing that they always have said consistently is they really wish they were able to change their working hours so that they could spend more time with their kids, that they don't feel they see them enough, and that they want to support their partner more in looking after them. But men don't tend to ask about flexible working as much as women do, because it's not so much of an issue for them if they've got a partner who's taken on the primary responsibility. But they should be asking, even if they don't necessarily need it. They should be asking because they want it. But the more voices that are asking for it, the more it becomes a normal thing, the more the tech companies will realize that it's something they need to address. It's not just the occasional thing that happens every now and then. If they've got a lot more people asking, they will have to start listening. So we want to get more support from men because we're still massively outnumbered in the technology industry as it stands. So we need some support from them too, and hopefully we can together convince our companies to change some practices. And well, that's it. We can go to the final slide now. So thank you for listening, and yeah, if you have any questions, I will do my best to answer them.
Thanks, Jo. Thank you to all the attendees as well who've submitted questions. You can still submit your questions if you haven't already. I'll start with the first one. 1 second. Oh. So, first question, have you got any ideas for dealing with not being accessible on your non-working days? I find that when I get back into the office sometimes, I've missed major decisions which don't always get communicated. Sometimes I've been turned down for projects because I'm not able to manage them 5 days a week.
Yeah, that's really difficult. And I think that's not a problem. That's not a problem with you or how you go about your working life. I think that's a problem with how people within your organisation are doing things. Like, you know, as I said when I talked about part-time, I don't think it's fair that people who choose to go part-time or have to go part-time are then, you know, not considered that they can do certain roles. How you change that is really difficult because this is about changing people's beliefs and people's culture. It has to come not just from you but from others. You need to, I think people need to speak up. Speaking up is the first point. You know, it's sort of saying that I feel that I could have done this role and it was not given to me, and I'd like to understand why. You've got to kind of try and fight your corner, I guess, and prove that, you know, or at least open the debate a bit more. I don't think people always do this with a, you know, an evil will. It's just people don't give it enough thought, and sometimes it just takes a conversation to change some people's perceptions. In terms of being sort of accessible, I mean, it's difficult because that's a very personal thing. Like if people are messaging you on days that you're not working, well, some people don't want that, and it's not fair on them. I mean, it's hard for me to say because I tend to respond to my messages whenever I get messaged, which may not be a healthy thing to do, but it needs to, I guess, come down to what you prefer. If you're happy to be messaged when you're not in the office, just, if it's going to be a quick thing, because sometimes, obviously you don't want to pressure people on their day off, but at the same time, if it's just a really quick question and you know that by not asking the person that it's going to cause more problems or it's going to cause upset, then I think it's fine to do that. But yeah, this is about changing people's culture and people's beliefs, and I think we have to, the only way we can do that is to keep speaking up and to find other allies that can also, communicate the same beliefs, because we know that we can do this. It's just convincing people that we can, and talking to them and telling them so.
Thanks very much. We've had another question. Was there any pushback initially, and how did you convince them?
Not really, no. I think just because because we know each other quite well and we've been in the industry a long time, I think the feeling was very much that we all wanted to do this. Something I didn't really get a chance to speak about was we kind of started doing flexible working a little bit before I got pregnant. We had someone that we really, really wanted to work with. He was a very talented guy. He was a dad, and he said that he really wanted to be able to work from home. And it wasn't even really a question of it. We just collectively as a group said, if he wants to work from home, let him work from home. It's fine. It's been easy for us to do this from the ground up because we're a new company. It's much more difficult to make that change in other companies. And I think what I'm trying to do is share our successes and show people it can be done, and that we can do it to great success, because we would be losing out on some really amazing people if we weren't. So I can't give you too much advice, I guess, on how to do it from within an existing company, because I haven't managed to do that myself, other than I just have to keep telling people why it's such a good thing and hope that they will start to understand. But pushback is common. It will happen. Like I said in the talk, when I talk to my peers about it, other people who work at other companies, there is often a lot of skepticism to say, well, it might work for you, but I just don't think it would work for us. And I just debate them, really. I just keep saying to them, well, think about all the things you're missing out on. Try and sort of show them that their fears are a bit irrational. And one of the biggest fears people have, I think, is that people won't work when they're at home for some reason, that they'll just be goofing off and they can't check up on them. And some of that can come down to better understanding of things like project management tools, and setting tasks out, getting people to put realistic estimates on them, getting peer reviews on those estimates as well. So what you can do is ask someone to set their estimates on their tasks, get someone in the same discipline to review those estimates and sort of say, yeah, they look reasonable, or no, they don't, or whatever, so that those estimates are realistic. And then you can monitor that as they complete those tasks. And if they're not completing them to what they said they'd do to a reasonable time, then if they're working or not. So it's very easy to control that. And I think that's it's important to keep reinforcing these points, because people make these decisions, it tends to be emotional and irrational. It's I just don't think that would work. I don't like the sound of it. We've got to give them the kind of facts and sort of counter that, and remind them of the things that they are potentially missing out on if they don't want to change.
Thanks, Jo. I think we'll probably have to stop it there. But thank you to everyone who participated and everyone who's asked questions.